We are counting down the 20 most talked about UK bread brands, from supermarket staples that pack in more emulsifiers, conditioners, and additives than actual flavour, to a handful of loaves crafted with true artisanal care. These rankings reveal which breads are masking bland taste and weak nutrition with processing tricks, and which 5 are genuinely worth your basket thanks to real ingredients and traditional methods. Which brands are quietly undermining your breakfast, and which bakeries still deliver the real thing? Let us break down each one, starting with number 20. Hovis Soft White lands at number 20 on the countdown, a familiar sight in kitchens across Britain, but a loaf built for softness above all else. The ingredient list tells a revealing story. After the basics like wheat flour, water, yeast, and salt, you will spot a cluster of unfamiliar codes: E282, E471, E472E, and sometimes E481. These are not there for taste or nutrition. E471 mono and diglycerides of fatty acids is a classic industrial emulsifier. Its job is to trap air and moisture, creating that signature pillowy texture. Alongside its partners, it keeps the crumb fine and uniform, the slices springy and slow to stale. Squeeze a slice and it springs back like memory foam, but the aroma barely hints at real wheat. The bread stays soft for days, but the flavour is muted, almost anonymous. This is the blueprint for ultra-processed white bread: soft, reliable, and engineered for shelf life rather than character. For anyone hoping for the depth or chew of a proper bakery loaf, Hovis Soft White is more cotton wool than bread. The first red flag? When emulsifiers start to outnumber real ingredients, softness comes at the cost of taste. Warburton's. Toasty sits on supermarket shelves with a label that reads like a technical manual. Right after the basics, wheat flour, water, and yeast, the telltale term appears: improver. This is not a secret code, it is a blend of dough conditioners, enzymes, and processing aids designed for one purpose: to make the dough behave perfectly on a factory line. The result is a loaf that looks almost unnaturally uniform, with every slice looking and feeling exactly the same from end to end. A glance at the ingredient list reveals conditioners such as E472E and ascorbic acid, both working behind the scenes to guarantee the crumb stays soft and the slices do not tear in the slicer. But when it comes to flavour, the loaf falls flat. The taste is muted and the aroma is barely there, bread engineered for machinability rather than eating pleasure. Put a slice in the toaster and the illusion unravels. The outside browns evenly, but the centre collapses, turning gummy instead of crisp. That is the handiwork of industrial improvers. They lock in moisture and softness, but sacrifice the chew and character of real bread. For anyone who cares about what bread should taste like, improver on the label is a warning, not a reassurance. If you want a tip, check the back of the pack. When you spot dough conditioner or improver high up the list, expect a loaf built for shelf life, not for satisfaction. Kingsmill Soft White lands at number 18 for one reason: its texture is engineered, not crafted. The secret sits halfway down the label: a blend of reducing agents and improvers, including ascorbic acid and enzymes designed to manipulate the dough at a molecular level. This is not about flavour or tradition, it is about building a crumb so springy it practically bounces back under your fingers. When you press a slice, it compresses with almost no resistance, then rebounds instantly, leaving barely a dent. That rapid memory foam effect is the result of the improver blend working overtime to create a closed elastic network inside the bread. Unlike loaves that rely on gums or stabilizers, Kingsmill Soft White achieves its signature softness through this chemical shortcut. The crust gives off almost no aroma, just a faint floury scent, and the crumb feels more like a synthetic sponge than anything that came out of a bakery oven. On the ingredients panel, the word improver is a dead giveaway, listed just after the basics and before additives start stacking up. If you want to spot this sort of loaf in the wild, look for a cluster of E numbers and the word improver in the middle of the list. For anyone who values bread with flavour and substance, this is a loaf built for shelf life and softness at the cost of everything else. Roberts Bakery's Soft White stands out for its heavy use of gums and stabilizers, a different approach to ultra softness than the emulsifiers and conditioners found in earlier loaves. On the ingredient label, xanthan gum and guar gum appear alongside the usual flour, water, and yeast. These hydrocolloids are not there for flavor or nutrition. Their job is to lock in water, giving the crumb a moist, sticky feel that lingers on the palate. When you press a slice, it resists at first, then yields with a slow, rubbery compression, far from the springy bounce of the previous brands. Chewing reveals the real impact. The bread clings to your teeth, almost like a paste, and the flavor barely registers. It is a texture engineered to survive days on a supermarket shelf, but it leaves the mouth feeling coated and unsatisfied. Gums like xanthan and guar are common in processed foods. In bread, they are a clear warning sign. If you spot them high up on the label, expect a loaf that is more about shelf life and moisture retention than genuine wheat aroma or satisfying chew. For those seeking a real bread experience, this is a slice best left behind. Tesco white sliced bread makes its case on price and convenience, but a closer look at the label tells a different story. After wheat flour, water, yeast, and salt, the next key player is calcium propionate, a preservative added specifically to keep mold at bay for a full week or more. This ingredient is the reason the loaf can sit in a cupboard long after a bakery loaf would have gone stale or started to turn. But that same preservative comes at a cost. The bread's aroma is almost non-existent, and the flavor is flat, with nothing to hint at fresh wheat or slow fermentation. The real test comes at breakfast. Toast a slice, then try to spread butter while it's still warm. The surface crumbles, and the crumb collapses under even a gentle touch. Instead of crisping up, the center turns limp, almost vanishing beneath the knife. That's the effect of a loaf built for shelf life. Structure is sacrificed for longevity, and the texture simply cannot stand up to real heat or real butter. For anyone scanning supermarket shelves, the words calcium propionate on the label are a clear signal. This bread is designed to last, not to taste. If you want bread that holds up to toasting and delivers real flavor, keep moving. Don't let the low price or soft feel fool you. When preservatives take center stage, quality is the first thing to disappear. Asda Baker's selection, white loaf takes the number 15 spot for a reason that is easy to measure: density, or rather the lack of it. Pick up a slice and it is almost weightless, more air than bread. On the scale, it clocks in as the lightest loaf in the lineup, with some packs averaging under 30 grams per slice. That is not just a quirk of baking, it is the result of a formula built to maximize water and air, stretching flour as far as possible. High-speed mixing and dough enhancers whip the dough into a foam, producing a loaf that looks full-sized but is mostly empty space. The ingredients panel confirms the cost-cutting. Vegetable oil sits surprisingly high on the list, helping to hold the bubbles together and fake a soft texture. But squeeze the slice and it collapses instantly, leaving a thin, sticky smear. Toast it, and the crumb turns patchy and limp, unable to hold any structure. This is not bread that fills you up or delivers real flavor. It is a supermarket value trick designed to look generous for the price, but offering little substance. For anyone trying to get the most nutrition or satisfaction from their loaf, a quick density check tells the whole story. If your bread feels like packing foam and vegetable oil is a top 5 ingredient, you are looking at an economic shortcut, not a real bakery loaf. Sainsbury's soft white loaf sits at number 14, and its label tells a familiar story. Refined wheat flour leads the list, followed by water, yeast, and salt. But after the basics, the ingredient order quickly reveals the priorities. Processing aids and improvers step in to guarantee a loaf that is always soft, always uniform, and always ready for the shelf. The promise is a dependable sandwich bread, but the reality is a slice that is more about shelf presence than flavor. A quick sniff test says it all. Where a bakery loaf gives off the warm, nutty aroma of fresh grain, Sainsbury's soft white offers little more than a faint, starchy scent, barely a whisper of wheat. The crumb is pale and tight, engineered for consistency but lacking the earthy character that comes from real fermentation. Press your nose to the slice and you are met with almost nothing. Any trace of fresh cereal is overwhelmed by the flat neutrality of refined flour and processing aids. The ingredient panel highlights the trade-off. After flour and water, you will find dough conditioners and improvers, sometimes listed as E numbers or as a generic emulsifier. These are there to keep the loaf soft for days, but they do nothing for taste. Flavor is sacrificed for the sake of a longer shelf life and a more reliable product. If you are looking for bread that actually smells and tastes like bread, Sainsbury's Soft White is a reminder to always check the label and trust your nose before you trust the packaging. Next up, the race to the bottom continues with a loaf that takes cheapness and airiness to the extreme. Morrison's Savors white bread takes cost-cutting to its logical extreme. On the scale, a single slice barely registers, often under 25 grams, making it the lightest in the entire countdown. That's not a fluke. It's the result of a formula stretched for maximum yield and minimum expense. The ingredient list reads like a chemistry set: flour, water, yeast, and salt, quickly followed by a cluster of dough improvers and emulsifiers. E471, E472E, and ascorbic acid show up together, working behind the scenes to whip the dough full of AIR and hold it there just long enough for baking. The crumb is so light and aerated that it almost dissolves between your fingers. Take a bite, and the flavor is barely noticeable, more neutral than even the cheapest rivals, with no hint of real grain or fermentation. Toasting does not help. The slice turns patchy and limp, collapsing under the lightest spread of butter. For anyone looking to save pennies, the price per loaf might look tempting, but the trade-off is clear. You're mostly paying for AIR and additives, not nutrition or satisfaction. If the first ingredient you notice is improver and the slice feels weightless, you are looking at a loaf designed for margins, not meals. Co-op white bread enters the countdown with a promise of everyday softness, but the label tells a different story. Past the basics, wheat flour, water, yeast, and salt, there is a lineup of E numbers: E471, E472E, and often E481, plus a preservative called calcium propionate. This blend of emulsifiers and conditioners delivers a loaf that feels plush on day one, with slices that bend and fold easily, almost like they are fresh from the oven. But the softness is engineered, not earned. A closer look at the crumb after just 24 hours reveals the trade-off. What started as pillowy quickly turns leathery and dry, especially around the crust. The texture loses its spring and the once flexible slices become tough and chewy, making sandwiches a chore and toast a disappointment. Ingredient lists from recent packs show at least 3 emulsifiers grouped together, with the preservative sitting just before them, classic signs of a loaf built for short-term appeal rather than lasting quality. A simple time-lapse tells the full story. By the next morning, yesterday's softness has faded, replaced by a dense, rubbery chew. For anyone hoping for a loaf that holds up through the week, Co-op white bread's quick decline is a letdown. If you want to test for yourself, check the label for that cluster of E numbers and try a slice after a day. What feels soft at first rarely stays that way. Lidl's Rowan Hill white bread lands at number 11 for one reason: you never know what you're going to get. On paper, it is just another budget loaf, but a closer look at the label reveals a hidden story. 2 loaves bought on the same day from different Lidl branches show different plant codes and even slight changes in the ingredient order. That is not just a technicality, it is a sign that production shifts between factories, each with its own recipe tweaks. Consumer reviews back this up. Some packs come out with a passable, if bland, crumb, while others leave buyers complaining about a gummy, almost gluey texture that clings to the teeth. The main culprit is inconsistent use of stabilizers and emulsifiers, which can swing batch quality from barely acceptable to outright unpleasant. Taste tests tell the same story. One slice might be dry and chewy, another oddly sweet or artificial, and the next so spongy it squashes flat under a knife. Even the aroma varies, with some loaves giving off a faint chemical whiff instead of real wheat. For shoppers, this means rolling the dice every time. If you want bread you can trust, unpredictable store-to-store quality is a risk not worth taking, especially when better, more transparent options are out there. Aldi Everyday Essentials bread sits at the bottom of the price chart, often under 40 pence a loaf, making it the cheapest option in most UK supermarkets. But that low price comes with a catch. A scan of the ingredients panel reveals a familiar pattern: wheat flour, water, yeast, and salt, quickly followed by vegetable oils and a cluster of dough improvers and emulsifiers. These additives are not there for nutrition or taste. They are working behind the scenes to create softness, extend shelf life, and keep the bread looking fresh long after baking. The result is a loaf that feels light and spongy, with a crumb that compresses to almost nothing under your fingers. When put to a blind taste panel, Aldi Everyday Essentials consistently lands at the bottom of the rankings. Tasters describe the flavour as flat, with barely any hint of real wheat. The texture is so soft it borders on flimsy, collapsing under the lightest spread. That is the trade-off. You save at the checkout, but pay in taste and satisfaction. For anyone tempted by the rock-bottom price, the label tells the real story. When oils, improvers, and gums fill out the ingredient list, you are getting more chemistry than craft. If you want bread that actually delivers on flavour and structure, sometimes it is worth spending a little more and reading past the price tag. Allinson's Soft White arrives with the language of a neighbourhood baker, crafted for softness, baker's tradition, and a heritage crest stamped on the front. But the illusion fades when you turn the pack over. After the standard wheat flour, water, yeast and salt, the label shifts quickly to a familiar formula: dough improver, ascorbic acid, and a blend of emulsifiers. E472E and E471 sit together, joined by ascorbic acid, all working to simulate the texture of a slow fermented loaf in a fraction of the time. The aroma test tells its own story, where real bakery bread fills the air with toasted wheat and subtle sour notes. Allinson's Soft White gives off little more than a faint floury scent, clean but nearly absent. Squeeze the crumb and it springs back, but the complexity just is not there. The taste is neutral, the crust thin and pale, and the overall experience is closer to a factory loaf than anything from a traditional oven. Heritage branding sits on the front, while a cluster of industrial additives hides on the back. The advice is simple: do not be fooled by the baker's story when the ingredient list tells a different tale. When improvers and emulsifiers lead the way, you are buying softness engineered in a lab, not flavour built in a bakery. Jackson's Yorkshire Bloomer stands out on shelves with its artisan-inspired branding, but the reality behind the mass-produced line tells a different story. Flip the pack and the ingredient list reveals a familiar pattern. After wheat flour, water, yeast and salt, a cluster of dough improvers and emulsifiers appears, E472E and E471 among them. These are not there for tradition, they are industrial shortcuts designed to guarantee a soft, uniform crumb every time, regardless of the bakery or batch. Compare this label with Jackson's own artisan range and the difference is immediate. The artisan loaf keeps the list short and simple, while the mass-produced variant leans on additives to mimic the look of hand-shaped bread. In a side-by-side tasting, the contrast is even sharper. The mass-produced Bloomer feels lighter, almost weightless, with a crumb that compresses easily and springs back like foam. The crust is thin, offering little chew or aroma, and the flavour fades quickly, more neutral than nutty, with none of the subtle tang or depth that comes from slow fermentation. The experience is all softness, no character. This is where many shoppers get tripped up. The packaging and name suggest a rustic bakery loaf, but the label tells the real story. For anyone aiming to avoid ultra-processed bread, the advice is simple. Always check both the front and the back of the pack. When you spot improvers and emulsifiers grouped near the middle of the ingredient list, you are looking at a loaf designed for consistency, not craftsmanship. The safest bet: do not let faux artisan branding take the place of real label reading. Bergen soya and linseed is easy to spot in the bread aisle, pitched as a health-forward choice with its mix of seeds and plant protein. But the ingredient list tells a different story. Stabilizers such as carboxymethyl cellulose appear early in the list. These functional additives do more than hold the loaf together. They create a springy, elastic texture that feels more like a processed snack than a bakery loaf. Processed choices often prioritize machine handling and shelf life over honest flavor. Many regular buyers report an odd, lingering sweetness that does not match the earthy taste you would expect from soya and seeds. Artificial notes are mentioned frequently, and others point to a chewy, elastic crumb that resists tearing but lacks the satisfying bite of real bread. The health halo around seeded loaves like Bergen can be misleading. While the seeds add some nutrition, much of the loaf's performance comes from stabilizers and processing aids. If you reach for this bread thinking it is a shortcut to better health, the label suggests it is more about engineered texture than genuine nutrition. For anyone chasing real bread benefits, it pays to look past the seeds and check the ingredient list for hidden stabilizers. Kingsmill 50/50 sits high on the avoid list for one reason: the gap between what is promised and what is actually inside the bag. The front shouts about whole grain goodness and fiber with a rich brown crumb that looks the part. But a scan of the ingredients tells another story. The first two flours are split, half refined white, half wholemeal, yet the colour owes as much to caramel E150A and malted barley extract as it does to any grain. These colorants deepen the hue, making the loaf appear more wholesome than it is. Flip to the nutrition panel, and the fiber lands at just under 5 grams per 100 grams, far below the 7 to 9 grams you would get from a true wholemeal loaf, and not much higher than some white breads. 2 slices give you around 4 grams of fiber, about 13% of the NHS daily target. That is a long way from the robust fiber hit you would expect from a loaf dressed up as a health food. Meanwhile, emulsifiers like E472E and E481 work behind the scenes to keep the crumb soft and the texture uniform, while malt vinegar and rapeseed oil extend shelf life. The result is a bread that looks brown and healthy, but delivers less fiber and more processing than the packaging suggests. For anyone reaching for 50/50 as a shortcut to better nutrition, the label tells a more complicated story. It is a masterclass in supermarket health washing, where caramel and malted barley stand in for real whole grain and softness comes from additives, not fermentation. If you want real fiber and flavor, this is a loaf to leave behind. Coombs Head Farm's sourdough stands apart for its simplicity and depth. The ingredient list reads like a return to basics: flour, water, salt, and a wild starter nurtured on the farm. Nothing else goes in, no emulsifiers, no preservatives, no shortcuts. Instead, the dough rests for over 24 hours, allowing wild yeasts and bacteria to develop layers of flavor that cannot be rushed or replicated by machines. This slow fermentation gives the loaf its open, irregular crumb and a rich, tangy aroma that fills the bakery each morning. Every slice has a chewy crust and a soft, moist interior, the kind that springs back under your fingers but never feels spongy or artificial. Bakers at Coombs Head point to the long, natural fermentation as the secret behind both the bread's digestibility and its deep, complex taste. Unlike supermarket loaves that rely on chemical softeners, here it is time and skill that do the work. For anyone looking to taste what real bread can be, Coombs Head Farm sourdough is proof that less truly is more. If you want a tip for finding bread with real character, look for a short ingredient list and a promise of long fermentation. Your taste buds will notice the difference. Shipton Mill organic bread earns its place on this list for one simple reason: the quality of its grain is the foundation of every loaf. At Shipton Mill in Gloucestershire, organic wheat is sourced from carefully selected farms, then milled using traditional stone and low-temperature roller methods. This approach preserves the natural oils, nutrients, and volatile compounds found in the wheat, which are often stripped away in high-speed industrial milling. The result is flour with a rich, distinctive aroma and a depth of flavor that stands out even before the first rise. A look at the ingredient list tells its own story: just organic flour, water, salt, and a natural leaven. There are no improvers, no dough conditioners, and no hidden additives. This short, transparent list is a sign of confidence in both the grain and the process. Shipton Mill's commitment to gentle milling means the flour retains more of the wheat germ and bran, boosting both nutrition and taste. Every batch of bread made from Shipton Mill flour reflects this care. The crumb is open and moist, with a nutty sweetness that comes directly from the grain itself, not from sugar or artificial flavorings. For anyone searching for bread where the origin of every ingredient matters, Shipton Mill proves that real flavor starts at the source. Tucked away in a converted shipping container in Dalston, the Dusty Knuckle has become a byword for real bread in the heart of the city. Their sourdough starts with just 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt, but the real magic comes from the wild starter, nurtured daily and never rushed. Each batch is given a long, slow proof, often upwards of 20 hours, allowing natural fermentation to unlock deep flavor and a gently tangy aroma that fills the bakery by dawn. Bakers here shape every loaf by hand, coaxing the dough into its final form with practiced movements honed through repetition. The result is a rustic, open crumb, full of air pockets, never uniform, and with a crust that crackles as it cools. The oven spring is unmistakable. Loaves leap up in the heat, creating that signature ear and caramelized edge. The Dusty Knuckle is not just about technique, though. The bakery has built a reputation for community, training young people in baking and supporting local food projects. As one baker puts it, we let time and care do the work. No shortcuts, no improvers, just patience. It is this blend of craft, integrity, and social purpose that puts the Dusty Knuckle at number 3. In a city dominated by chain stores, they prove that you can scale up real bread without losing what matters: honest ingredients, skilled hands, and a loaf that tastes alive. Gale's Bakery stands out for making artisan bread accessible on a scale few others can match. With more than 100 locations across the UK, their loaves are shaped by hand, but the real secret is what happens before the dough even hits the oven: a slow, natural fermentation that takes up to 24 hours. Unlike supermarket bread, the ingredient list stays short: flour, water, salt, and a natural sourdough starter, nothing more. This approach delivers a crumb that is open and moist, with a deep wheat aroma and a crust that crackles as you slice. Tasting panels comparing Gale's loaves from 2 different sites found the flavor remarkably consistent, with a gentle tang and a nutty finish that holds up whether you buy it in London or Manchester. The crumb stays resilient, never gummy or bland, and the crust develops a proper chew, signs of time and skill, not additives. Ingredient lists from current packs confirm there are no emulsifiers, no preservatives, and no improvers. Instead, it is the long fermentation that gives each loaf its structure and character, allowing the natural flavors of the grain to shine through. For anyone looking to trade up from factory bread without hunting down a tiny local bakery, Gale's proves that quality and scale do not have to be opposites. This is why it lands at number 2, a chain that brings real bread to the high street, making it possible for more people to taste the difference that time, care, and clean ingredients can make. Hobbs House Bakery stands as the gold standard for British bread done right. Nestled in the Cotswolds and run by the Herbert family for 5 generations, their approach is rooted in patience and tradition. The heart of their sourdough is a natural starter that has been continuously nurtured for over a century, passed down, refreshed, and cared for like a living heirloom. Every loaf begins with just flour, water, salt, and that heritage starter. No improvers, no preservatives, and not a single industrial additive in sight. This commitment is more than marketing. Ingredient lists for their flagship sourdough stay refreshingly short, and independent panels have praised the bread for its deep, caramelized crust and unmistakable aroma that fills the kitchen as soon as it is sliced or toasted. Awards from the Great Taste. Awards and World Bread Awards back up the bakery's reputation, with judges calling out the robust flavor and chewy crumb. A slice from Hobbs House does not collapse or turn gummy in the toaster. Instead, it crisps at the edge, the crust crackles, and the aroma lingers. For anyone searching for the real thing, the loaf that proves British bread can be world-class, Hobbs House Bakery is the final word. Across all 20 brands, one pattern stands out. In the UK bread aisle, mass production often comes at the expense of real nutrition and authentic flavour. The dominance of additives and shortcuts reflects a wider food culture that prioritizes shelf life over substance. This matters because bread is more than filler. It is daily fuel. Choosing wisely shapes our health and supports true craft. Want more honest food breakdowns? Hit subscribe and join the conversation below.